He didn't start playing competitive football until he was 16, but Duvernay-Tardif loved it, playing at McGill while attending medical school, then making the rare leap from a Canadian university to the NFL.
Let's go!
In his first 4 years as a pro, he continued his studies and became the only NFL player to also have a medical degree. Oh, and he's a Super Bowl champion too.
The Kansas City Chiefs are champions!
And then Duvernay-Tardif walked away from the NFL to serve on the front lines of the COVID pandemic. It's an incredible story of character and excellence on the field and off. When I talk to people about your story, there are two things that they're always amazed about. And the first one is, how did you manage to combine getting a medical degree and getting to the NFL? And I know you've answered this lots of times, but how do you do that?
Well, honestly, I think when I was at McGill, it was probably the most challenging time for me because I was both a football player and a medical student at the same time. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, that idea of finding some sort of balance, you know, and the concept of excellence. Like I know I'm not going to be the best football player. I know I'm for sure not going to be the best physician out there. But I think I kind of found my niche, and my expertise became to be able to balance both. And I think that's something really powerful, because when I got to the NFL, the hardest thing then became to transition from one to the other, because you play football, you got to dedicate 100% of your focus and attention to learning the playbook, going through the mental and physical grind of a football season, and then you lose in the playoff, and boom, you're back as a medical student at McGill, at the Jewish, at the Montreal General Hospital, and it's hard, you know, that mental transition, because you can imagine, like, you play in front of 80,000 people, and you got a whole team of professionals focusing on your well-being and your performance, and then boom, within a week, you're now part of that team that is there to focus on the care of the patient. And for me, that mindset has always been the hardest thing to transition from.
So the other thing that people are amazed at when they hear your life story is that in the middle of your football career, after winning a Super Bowl, you stepped away to come back to Canada because you felt you should be at the front lines of the fight against COVID. And you really were on the front lines. You worked as an orderly, because at that point you weren't a licensed doctor, in a long-term care facility.
Everything's gonna be okay. Going from winning the Super Bowl to working on the front line of the pandemic, it wasn't easy, but it was important for me to do it because, you know, 5-10 years from now, I want to be a physician, you know, and I'm going to evolve around the medical community. And I think it was important for me to be able to look at myself in the mirror and be like, I follow my convictions.
When there was a COVID outbreak in the facility that you were in, I think you got a call from one of the supervisors and said, look, you know, you might be going back to the NFL. We don't want you to get sick. You stay home. And you said, no, I'm coming in.
I mean, what's the point of going to help if when help is needed, you quit on people, you know? It was a tough call. I actually called the Kansas City Chiefs at the time, and I spoke with Coach Reed, and I was like, Coach, I'm about to go work in a red zone, in a healthcare facility where there are a lot of COVID and a COVID outbreak.
And red zone there means a place with an active COVID outbreak.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the 20-yard line in where you got to score a touchdown.
Different red zone.
Different red zone, but yeah. But I think it was important for me because after, you know, 2-3 weeks of working with a new team inside a very stressful environment, I think I didn't see how I could leave.
Laurent Duvernay-Tardif announced over the weekend he's opting out of the 2020 season.
I've seen, like, firsthand the shortage of staff, people getting sick, people dying.
I just don't see how I can just go about my business and play football right now.
Lots of cool.
Respect the decision for him to help out his community and doing something to make the world a better place.
What?
I just think it's tremendous dedication to his profession, what his future is going to be, and mainly to the people that he gets to help.
Oh, please say hi.
Hi!
This is the T. I think there's so many things that I learned in there that you're not really exposed to when you go through medical school. You know, first of all, the fact that you're in a really stressful environment in a pandemic, but also the fact that you're working in a long-term care facility, which you don't really do as a medical student. And on top of that, the fact that I was working as an orderly, which is, you know, on the spectrum, really different from the physician position, but at the same time so essential. Baiting people, interacting with people, they're not like medical action when you look at it from a medical professional, but during the pandemic, those were really the kind of thing that made a difference, I think, because you're in an environment where people are not going back home. You know, it's either COVID or something else, unfortunately. And being able to provide some comfort and some dignity, that, to me, that's the difference between treating and caring for people. And I think that's what I learned. And I learned it from all the medical professional nurses and orderly that I worked with, and all the people that gave so much, that sacrificed so much, and they've been doing it for the past 25 years and nobody's really, you know, talking about them, you know, and they do it with so much dedication and passion. And it was really important for me to talk about what we experience in there. In time of like intense stress, I think you build relationship and chemistry with people that lasts forever. I hope so, you know.
Let's talk a little bit about football and the duality. And you touched on it earlier, the violence on the field, especially when you're playing the line, and what must be the gentle compassion of being a doctor. Even emotionally, how do you manage to straddle those two worlds?
To some extent, I think I'm a different person when I step on a football field, because you have to. Like, you need the confidence. You cannot, like, in medicine, I feel like you question yourself a lot, you know, and you interact with people by asking questions. And in football, you need a certain form of confidence. Like, when you step on a football field, you got to believe that you have all the tools in your back pocket to dominate the guy in front of you. Otherwise, there's no chance you're going to win, you know. And medicine is so different. It's all about interacting, communicating, showing empathy, you know. But at the same time, we were talking about the importance of balance. I think for me, medicine is kind of what kept me grounded throughout my career in football, and vice versa. Like, I learned so much things in football that's going to translate into the medical field, like learning to make a rational decision in a stressful environment. It's 3rd and 5, you got 80,000 people yelling at you, and you got to be able to not only look at your guy, but look at the whole defense, take a minute to analyze, and that's hard to do. But when you work in an emergency room, you got to be able to do that as well. Like, look at vital signs, you know, airway, breathing, circulation, and not get distracted by the blood or people yelling or whatever. So I think sport can really teach you a lot, a thing that go way beyond winning and losing, and it can translate into, for me, the medical world.
But be honest with me for a sec. When you're on the line in the middle of that violence, are you a trash talker?
I try to trash talk, but my English is not good enough. So I rely a lot on my teammates to do that for me. But no, I'm a competitor. So of course, like, if I have the opportunity to just bury you at the end of the play, I'm gonna do it, you know, and I'm gonna tell you whether you like it or not at the end. And it's just the way it is, you know. But that's, you know, in football, there's, you know, yes, you try to make first down, you try to score points, but at the end of the day, it's also a game of, like, it's almost like martial arts, you know, and you got to read the nonverbal cues, and if you project confident, it's going to affect your opponent, you know. And I work with a sports psychologist, and sometimes we do the exercise of looking at a game without looking at the actual plays. And just at the way I'm standing, the way I walk to the line of scrimmage, the way my opponent is walking to the line of scrimmage. And just by looking at that, you know whether the last play was a good play or not. You know, and when you're conscious of that, you can use that to your advantage. And that's kind of what we call the game within the game, you know, and that's what makes football so interesting. And I feel like I keep learning all the time when it comes to football, because there's the strategic aspect, but there's also the mental component, because it's a physical game, and when you get beat, not only you get beat strategically, but also physically, and how you're going to respond to that. That's really interesting.
It's a violent sport. It is a sport where the danger of injury is present all the time.
Kareem Hunt tries it right up the middle, and he gets pounded right away and driven down. The Chiefs have an injured player on this snap. It's Duvernay-Tardif, their most consistent offensive lineman, is down with an injury.
What happened, Larry?
I popped my MCL.
You what?
I heard a pop my MCL.
Your MCL, okay.
Yeah.
So you diagnosed your own MCL tear on the field, and then later on you had a concussion, and concussions and football obviously are a hot topic. How safe is football?
I feel like it's getting safer. Is it safe? I think it depends who's your coach. I think it depends who's in charge of the culture of the program. Because at the end of the day, a concussion is still going to remain a subjective diagnosis to some extent. You know, it's based on the player reporting his symptoms, unless it's a really severe case. But in order for a player to report a symptom in a competitive environment, you got to make him feel like he's able to do it, like he has the space and the possibility to share that without being judged. And I think that's the biggest thing, you know. And when you look at football at the youth level, we got to be extremely cautious, especially with at that age, with what we know about the brain development. We got to make sure that the coaches that are out there are open and sensitive to that subject.
My wife asked me to ask you this question. If you have kids one day, would you let them play football?
I would be the coach, but yes, I would let them play. No, but I think it comes down to the culture of the organization and the coaches and the technique that you teach the kid. And to me, like the physicality of the sport is kind of a byproduct of what you're trying to accomplish, which is to move a football across, 100 yards and try to score a touchdown. So if you see it that way, and you see contact as like a vector of forces, and how can you be the most efficient to open, a gap so that your running back can run instead of just trying to destroy the guy in front of you, like, then I think you get into a place where you can say that football is safe or safer.
You said earlier in the interview that 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to be a doctor. You'll be practicing medicine. You won't be a football player.
No.
How does that feel?
I feel pretty good about it. Right now, of course, there's a little bit of uncertainty about what I'm going to do in the next year or so, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be my choice. Like, do I want to go back and play? And of course, I love the game, but we were just talking about how physical it is. And for me, like every year that I go back to football, I feel like I'm also leaving something behind, medicine, my foundation, projects, friends, families, and I think that's good, because the harder you make it to go back to football, I hope that it's going to mean that I'm going to transition well into full-time residency and eventually full-time doctor. So yeah, I'm at the cross section of my life right now, and I don't know which way I'm going to go for the next 12 months or so, but at the end of the day, I'm exactly where I want to be, honestly.